Welcome, Antonio, to the Postpartum Prep Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Would you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into it?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. So I'm Antonio. I'm from Peru, and I'm a baby-wearing educator who advocates strongly for dads, baby wearing, and people wearing in traditional carries.
I follow you on Instagram and I love learning about all the different we're gonna talk about it in a bit later, but all the different types of carries, the traditional carries. And you're also the first dad that we've had on the podcast. So that's something that I'm really excited to have you here today. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was about how dads can be more involved with postpartum recovery, how they can support it. And I was wondering what you can tell us about that.
Yeah, so postpartum recovery is for all the family, from my perspective. The way I see it, we all need to recover from postpartum. Dad, baby, pets, and mom, especially. So if we get to work as a team, we can get things faster and more efficient. And I think that could really have an important role in facilitating mom's recovery and taking care of that connection in between mom and baby, because we should be the providers of such safety as well.
I agree with you so much, and I think it's amazing that you're here today because we're going to talk about how dads can be involved. We're going to record a whole Q&A episode about how they can be involved with kind of the practicalities and logistics of postpartum life. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about how baby wearing can support dad's involvement in postpartum recovery and supporting postpartum life. When it comes to baby wearing, could you tell us a little bit about how that can support the whole family and maybe how dads can be involved with baby wearing as well?
Yeah, so at first, during the first postpartum days, you want to extend your baby's exposure to a like artificial womb. So baby wearing facilitates that. So your baby can adapt more efficiently to life outside mom.
Mm,
And while you do that, mom can have time for herself. Because, um, we all talk about recovery for knee surgery and recovery for shoulder surgery or for any type of surgery. But moms have to endure a very, very strong episode when they uh, give birth. Um, Regardless of how they do it, if it's a C-section, they will need recovery. If it's if they just give birth naturally, they will also need time to recover. So we can provide that space for both the mom and the baby, but also for dads, because when all those days, all those postpartum days, you're sleep deprived, you cannot think that much, and you're stressed out, mom and dad, you don't know what to do at home. So baby wearing takes away one very important load out of it. So by having your baby close during the first days, you are actually able to do a lot more than you would by holding your baby on your arms or putting the baby down on a crib or on the floor.
I love that. It's about the practicality of, having your baby holding them. It means you can do more. And it's also about that transition from, I love what you mentioned, the baby coming into the world from the womb and how baby wearing supports it, it kind of gives them that feeling again of being in the womb and how it's not only moms that can give that feeling, but also dads.
Yeah, and dads have a very important role because moms and babies are already um, their systems are already matching. But what about
Mm.
dad? We need to adapt, and we like our hormones have not adapted yet. Moms and babies are aligned, but dads are not. The way that we can find that balance is uh, when we take care of the babies, because that way our oxytocin levels can actually balance, and we have this idea that we are doing a great job, and baby responds well, then I'm happy because I'm doing a good job. And I do a better job now, and my baby responds well, and that creates a virtuous cycle.
It really builds that confidence, I think, is what I'm hearing. in
So
dads. Yeah, it's like a
yeah,
positive feedback loop.
and we can also be a safe space.
Mm,
We must be another safe space because there's not only mom but also dad. We have an important role there,
yeah.
and not only are we taking care of the baby but also of mom. And
Yeah.
if mom is okay, then baby is going to be okay. And as a consequence, dad will be okay because you will have more time to be well rested
Mm,
to work at home or to do some office job or whatever job you are currently working at.
mm. And I love how you mentioned it's kind of it supports every member of the family. And it's really about that working as a team so that mom and dad, the more mom is well rested, the more she can help dad be more well rested and vice versa. And I also loved how you mentioned a little while ago about supporting bonding really for dad and the baby. And this is one thing, I'm a lactation counselor, so I often get a lot of questions about dads who are asking about maybe can they give a baby bottles because they want to focus on bonding with the baby. And there's lots of things I could say about that, but one of the things that I like to say is bonding, feeding the baby is not the only way to bond with a baby. And I love you mentioned baby wearing can be so supportive, and even you can do it skin to skin, and all of it, like you said, the oxytocin, and even like rewiring your brain as a dad, it can help with that. It's amazing.
Yeah, by baby wearing, you get to know your baby. And by knowing your baby, I don't mean their interests or what they like, but you know how they breathe, you know how they move. You get to know what their signs are, their cues. So it's a lot of information that both your baby receives from you, but you also benefit a lot from your baby. I think you bond, but you also get to know your baby a lot better, and your baby gets to know you a lot better. Because a newborn can tell how dad breathes and how mom breathes. They
Mm,
can sense how dad smells and how mom smells. So they know um, there are two people that are taking care of them. So, I mean, they know there are two people because babies are not fully aware of the fact that individuality yet, but they are building that capacity. And through having another person who is participating actively and providing another safe space, your baby not only bonds with them. I mean, dad is another care as another person who's taking care of the baby, but also it could be uh your sister, your mom, or your brother, your or any sibling, or any other adult that's helping you taking care of the baby.
mm. Yeah, baby wearing becomes a way for anyone to really become involved in helping to take care of the baby. I got goosebumps when you talked about how it helps dad to like learn about the baby because it made me think, learning about the baby's breathing, and it just made me think it's really like helping to switch on that father's intuition, which I always talk about mother's intuition about how because you just have that you just know exactly everything about your baby. And then this is really helping to develop that father's intuition where you just know instinctively how they breathe and how their heart rate is. And um I love that you mentioned that. So thank you for sharing that. For anybody who is interested in getting started with baby wearing, especially for dads, would you give us some tips? So maybe like when can they start baby wearing and how can they choose a carrier?
And I think it's a great idea to start learning how to baby wear before your baby is born. Because, as I mentioned before, you're sleep deprived. Sometimes you barely have time to shower. You're not going to have a lot of a brain availability to learn the skills you need to baby wear. So you can actually start doing it before. I like providing guidance through pregnancy, then the first days where the baby's born, and then a follow-up later. For example, very close friends of us started taking baby wearing lessons with me while they were pregnant. And now we recently saw them yesterday. They were using buckle carrier like perfectly. And I didn't teach them about the buckle carrier, I had taught them about all their carriers during our lessons, but they knew everything they had to know to figure that out on their own. And they did it because they started earlier. And of course, they were very, very involved with it. So for dads wanting to baby wear, so we need to accept that some things do not really come so naturally to fathers, but we can learn. For example, our father's intuition, it may not be as strong as a mom's, but we can develop that by doing some work. And the same way we can learn how to baby wear before, we can learn maybe the theoretical part, how it works, why we want to do it. And maybe you just learn to use one carrier, one carry at a time, and you're fine with it because you don't need to know a lot of carries, a lot of carriers, just the one that your baby wearing consultant would advise you to. So during postpartum, we can kind of predict how the baby's weight, the baby's size, when the baby is due. So you have a lot of information as to decide beforehand so that your baby's born, you already have your carrier and you know how to use it. And then that's where it starts. For example, we started baby wearing like as soon as the baby was born. She left the hospital being carried by me on a stretchy wrap, which was the one that we had at that time. And we haven't stopped ever since. So I'm not only telling you because of my experience, but of other people I've worked with as well.
Oh, I love that. And I think, I mean, I obviously am very aligned with the idea of trying to learn about this before you give birth. That's exactly why we have you on the podcast here today, because I do think so much about these things. It's like exactly like you said, you think that you'll have time after you give birth, but actually, your baby's born as soon as you give birth. Like you need it as soon as you've given birth, and learning about how to take care of your baby before you've given birth just sets you up right from the start, so you're better off. Um, are there any tips that you have about choosing a carrier for a newborn?
Yeah, the best advice I could give is to get a baby wearing consultant
Mm,
because people are always looking for the best carrier for a newborn or the most affordable one or one that I can get the most popular. But the thing is that it may not always work. What worked for me may not work for you.
mm,
Because first, we need to consider our bodies, our baby's size and developmental stage. It's not the same wearing a 38 month a baby that was born at 38 weeks. That would work almost similarly to a baby that was born at 40 weeks. But what about babies that are born earlier? You cannot wear any type of carriers with them, so you may need some specific strategies. There are ways in which we can adapt our carriers to our babies. And what's more, um, we have different learning styles and different learning curves. So maybe you may not have the ideal carrier for a newborn, but that's the one you can use best. And as a consequence, it's better if you use a carrot that you can somehow adapt to your baby and you use it well and safely than using a carrot that's ideal for newborns, but you don't know how to.
mm.
So that's why I always recommend getting a baby wearing consultation, especially for smaller kids. Not only because of that, because also by watching YouTube videos, you can definitely learn. But how much can you take in when you are so stressed and when you need to take care of a lot of things and you have little time to learn something online?
True. I've had this is a little bit of like a not exact metaphor, but like a parallel, is I've been working with a fitness coach recently, and the it's crazy when you're working with a coach who just really knows what they're talking about, because your progress is so much faster, and you learn things that you didn't even realize that you would need to know. Does that make sense? And I think I had, Jacqueline from your baby wearing bestie.
Sure, sure. She's my baby
Yeah.
wearing best.
Yeah, that's the same thing I tell her. You're my baby wearing bestie. Um, so she was on the podcast a few weeks ago. I don't know if you saw, yeah. And
Yeah, I heard the
um
episode.
sh you did, ah.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Um, and in the episode she talks about how people will just really struggle through baby wearing, and really all you need to do is just ask for help. And I think once you do ask for help, it becomes so much easier. And did you see that reel she also posted recently where it was talking about people being kind of like, well, a baby wearing consultant, that sounds like a fake job. And like, did you see that reel she posted?
I saw that, and I've heard that a
Yeah.
lot.
And it's just crazy to me because I just think of actually once you nail baby wearing, your entire life with your baby can change. I really believe that. Like, um, and I love having you guys on the podcast because I want people to see like why getting support for baby wearing matters so much. I'm curious. You said that you started baby wearing as soon as you kind of your baby was born, leaving the hospital. How kind of what got you started with baby wearing? How did you learn about baby wearing?
Well, in South American countries, there's a very um, wide tradition of baby wearing. But it's so natural to us that we don't even have a name for baby wearing. We just call it carrying your baby
Okay.
because it's understood that if you carry a baby, you cannot do it with your bare hands because you need to do some things. So the only logical thing to do is to put your baby on your back.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that baby wearing is natural and intuitive. You need to learn it. But usually, through oral tradition, you learn from your mom, from your grandma, and other women around you. Um, Kids also learn to baby wear from a very young age, both boys and girls. But I need to ask how, but somehow at some specific point in traditional baby wearing, it's not okay for men to baby wear. You know, we have this male chauvinistic thoughts that persist today. But anyways, boys have probably learned to baby wear their little siblings when they were younger. And when they started doing manual labor, they quit baby wearing so women could um, take care of the baby while men work outside. So that's somehow how traditional baby wearing works. We have a lot of traditional baby wearing here, and I grew up seeing those women. I didn't learn directly until my daughter was born how to traditional baby wear
Okay.
because we have a lot of detachment and disconnection from our roots. Baby wearing is a natural practice. We find it all around the world. Uh, but there's a generation gap of people who have not learned to baby wear in the capital. I live in Lima, where we have people from all over Peru living here. And some of them brought their traditions, but some of them left them behind. So baby wearing is natural. Um, I would say most people would actually recognize how Peruvian or Bolivian baby wearing works. We have all seen women carrying childs on their backs, but we don't know how to perform it. But we know what it is. We are very familiar with it. It won't be a surprise for someone to see a baby on someone's back, but that's traditional baby wearing. Regarding more ergonomic baby wearing with a more like modern perspective, yeah, we don't really know much about it here. I heard about baby wearing when I was at physical therapy school. It was only mentioned briefly during a class, and that got me curious, and that actually brought back an avalanche of ideas that I have seen when I was a kid. And I say,
Oh,
yeah, I remember when I was a kid and I saw those women carrying their childs. That's what I wanted to do in the future with my baby. So I started digging in. I had some friends who had baby worn before me, and the one that actually got me into baby wearing is a friend of mine who is from Denmark, and her husband is Peruvian. And he told me everything about baby wearing and her experience there and how it helped her. um, be socially successful when she came to Peru. And I said, okay, yeah, I really need to learn about this. Then my wife and I, during pregnancy, attended a antenatal course where they mentioned baby wearing. I was already convinced I was going to baby wear. I
Mm,
didn't know how yet because I had not much information. It's not easy to get information about baby wearing here in Peru. And at least it wasn't last year. Now more people are open to talk about it. There are more platforms that are sharing baby wearing, both traditionally and modern baby wearing. So in that lesson, they asked for a volunteer. Who is going to baby wear? And there were no volunteers with me, like, hey, me, I want a baby wear. I'll learn. So the teacher said, okay, come here. You're gonna use a stretcher wrap. I learned how to use it with a demo doll, which, by the way, was not a baby wearing demo doll. That was another type of doll for physical therapy, but it worked well enough. And I learned, I took notes, and I said, okay, let's start with the stretcher wrap because it's something I've already gotten.
mhm.
I will get a jigja later, but I still need to figure out how to use it. Not because I don't know how to. I may need to go outside to the streets and ask women who baby wear to teach me.
What was that
And
you said? A what kind?
the jigja.
I wouldn't even be able to say that.
Uh,
But what is that? Is
the
that
the jigya is our one of our traditional carriers here.
okay?
It's also called manta,
Okay.
and the word jigya is a Quechua word. Quechua is a group of native languages in South America. It's a Quechua word that stands for mantle or blanket.
Is this the one I've seen that where she's on your back and it's like a triangle shape once you've folded it?
Yeah,
Is it that one? Yeah. Okay.
that's the one. And I was wondering how to use it since a very young age because it looks as a triangle, but it's
Mm,
actually a square, not a
okay.
perfect square, but you fold it in half.
Mm-hmm.
The inner layer is the one creating the seat for your baby
Okay.
and keeping it there. But then there's the outer layer that looks like a flap. So you get wondering how are babies floating on someone's back
Yeah.
if the fabric is not even uh, tightened, it's totally loose. And there was no one to learn from. So I decided to enroll with my teacher and I started learning with her. And then I said, well, I need to do a lot of things here because people don't know about baby wearing. People are not aware that we have a carrier that we should be using. So I need to do something about it. And then I started studying to become a baby wearing consultant
Uh,
at that time.
wow, what a journey. And yeah, not only are you the only now you're sharing all your journey and all your info on Instagram. And you're the only baby wearing dad account that I know of at the moment, unless you have others. But are there
Um,
others? A few maybe.
yeah, there are a few dads who
Yeah.
baby wear actively, but they're not consultants.
Okay.
But they're like terrific wear rappers. Some of
Yeah.
them do things that are amazing, and but not all of them are baby wearing consultants. They don't pursue a career there, but they do baby wear a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And as I grew on, especially in TikTok, where I drop a lot of content in Spanish about the traditional carriers and the carriers that are available here in Peru, I got to know a lot of fathers who were
Mm.
wearing their kids using a jikja. But
Oh.
because of those male chauvinistic ideas I mentioned before, most of the comments I got is, okay, my husband wears my baby inside my home, but he really doesn't feel secure enough to go outside carrying the baby because we live in a place where that's kind of frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
And here is a very mean comment from family. And family can be your best allies, but they can also be the your worst enemies sometimes. Um, so I wanted to become because of what you mentioned. There are no many men baby wearing or showing that online. I thought men needed someone to relate to.
Mm.
You know how men always want to feel that we do things without much help or more help than necessary. Like yeah, we did it by ourselves. We were somehow like little kids. Uh, but men also need to feel represented as
Mm,
well. So I'm glad I'm becoming that figure for some of them.
yeah.
That I oftentimes I receive messages telling me, "Hey, thanks a lot for what you're teaching us." And now, they send me a couple of pictures telling me,
Oh,
"This is how I wore my baby today. I'm so grateful. Thanks a lot." I'm not afraid anymore of baby wearing because as soon as they tell me something, I say, "Hey, this is a guy from Peru and he's an educator and he baby wears traditionally, so I can do it as well." And
yeah.
if not many men are baby wearing, if you compare them to how many women are doing
Yeah.
so.
I think it's inspiring, and I think sometimes you exactly like you say, you need that someone that you can relate to, someone. I know you're also really into fitness, which is just kind of things that guys are into, and they can kind of see themselves in you and see, oh yeah, it's okay to um baby wear in public, and it can be like a thing that men do.
Mm.
Um I wanted to ask one more thing before we wrapped up because one of the things that we had connected over in the DMs is both of us were not from the US, whereas most of the people that um, I think the majority of people that have been on my podcast are from the US, and the majority of the baby wearing I'm pretty sure all the baby wearing consultants I know, other than you, are from the US. And it's really interesting because I think I got the impression from you that US culture can be quite different to Peruvian culture when it comes to raising babies. Would you tell us a little bit about the differences that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's very different. First, starting with baby wearing. Uh, I've talked to a lot of consultants in the US. Um, One of their recommendations is to have baby very high in your back so that you can know how they're doing. It's safer. It's a very safe position to have baby high up on your back, resting here, because you can feel how they breathe. You can look at your baby. You can just raise a phone or a small mirror, and you can turn around and see your baby. But that's something we don't do here. Actually, babies
Oh,
are totally covered. You don't get to see their faces ever, unless moms put the babies in front to breastfeed, and then they
mm,
put them back
okay.
there because
Yeah.
it's um, we learn how to listen to our babies with our whole body
Okay.
and our senses, not
Yeah.
only visually. But if we practice that, and that's something I work with my clients, I ask them,
Yeah.
hey, we can relax a little bit. You can breathe and you can start feeling your baby. Can you feel your baby? Yeah, can you feel where your baby is facing? What cheek is close to you? Is it the
Mm,
left one or the right one? Can you feel your baby's breathing? Yeah, can you feel her hands moving? And yeah, you get to feel a lot of that. If you relax enough and you're calm and you open your senses, you can feel your baby's heartbeat. And you can even, oh, I have, you can even feel their gut movement. So you have a lot of information about baby wearing. So that's about baby wearing. We kind of trust our instincts a little bit more than regular baby wearing recommendations because we don't get to see babies. We guarantee safety through other means. In ergonomic baby wearing, that's tension. But the carriers we use here are usually not actually carriers. They are just pieces of fabric that we had adapted to babies. So we compensate that lack of tension with volume. Babies are usually wrapped and swaddled like little tacos, and that prevents postural asphyxiation, and babies are safe like that. But that's something you learn directly from your mom, your grandma, your father, or someone in your family or your community. Which leads me to the next word is that we have a very participatory parenting uh, from all the community. Not
mm,
only mom and dad, but also families are very involved. For example, for me, um, our parents, both my wife's and mine, and our families take care of us so that we can take care of the baby. They don't take care of the baby directly unless it's necessary because sometimes they do, but they take care of us. They make sure we are okay. They make sure uh that we are doing well, that we have everything we need so that we can take care of our baby. And that's one thing that is very common here. If we don't have such thing as babies need to be at daycare at 3 months, you need to take them, uh, you need to potty train your kid, you need to sleep train your kid. If you actually ask people in some communities, they laugh at that. Like, hey, what's the other option? What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to put my baby on the floor? What are you talking about when you tell them about putting babies on the floor and playing independently? Um, so we don't have such things. We don't have those concepts. And somehow it's very helpful for us to think like that because babies get to spend more time with a relative or with someone close. For example, if my friend needs to work and they don't have anyone to look after their baby, they are totally welcome to come here. And we, as a family, will take care of both the babies
Mm.
as if they were our own. When I was a baby, my mom would breastfeed my cousin and me at the same time because my aunt was not able to breastfeed. So that's very common as well. Even there's something that we call the Spanish word is retetar, but in English that'll be something like to relactate.
Yes, relactate. Mhm.
Grandmothers do that here, or aunts do that here.
Wow.
In some communities, that's a thing that
Yeah,
happens usually.
yeah,
Um, not as the main source uh, of feeding the baby, but because sometimes moms have to leave to
yeah,
work temporarily, and babies can stay with grandma or with a cousin that has recently had a baby, or maybe has a 5-year-old kid, but they can relactate again.
yeah, yeah.
So we have that a lot. So sometimes you see um, women breastfeeding babies, you see, well, but there's no way she's the mom. And they're actually the grandmas that are
Wow.
breastfeeding and relactating. Yeah, that's a very common thing. And I didn't know there was a name for that because it was very a common sight in some
Yeah.
places.
And like you said, even with baby wearing, it's just so natural and normal that you don't have that same a name for baby wearing. It's just carrying your baby.
Yeah, it's just carrying the baby. Yep,
Yeah.
there's no word for that.
And I think one thing that really, right at the beginning, how you were kind of talking about, or sorry, at the beginning of this question, how you had been talking about developing that kind of intuitive sense for your baby, really being able to feel into your baby and what they're feeling, if even if you can't see them. I mean, even going back, that just I think lays there's this foundation of intuition and just kind of tuning in to your baby that I think is really discouraged in other, in kind of,
No.
in like the US culture and kind of hearing things about, again, like about sleep training your baby and disconnecting from, just what is more natural. And I think it creates like um, it means that there's lots more ways that people can make money off of um telling
Attachment?
you how you should be with your baby and of the problems that
Yeah.
can come about when we don't just kind of learn how to tune into our baby. And it's just it's fascinating to hear what a different perception people have when it comes to raising babies and the
Mhm.
community around raising babies, which is not even just about the baby, but it's just the general sense of community, it sounds like. Um,
Mhm.
wow. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing. Yeah.
yeah, detachment is a very rich industry.
Yes.
And well, it
That's
has
a
reached
great
here.
way to say it. Yeah.
It hasn't reached like South American grounds, of
Mm,
course, in some upper class circles. People are very detached from their babies, and that's very common because somehow they want to do what people in the USA are doing.
Mm,
Because we have this thought that it's something that some people desperately aspire to. Like, oh, if they're wearing this device, they're using this device, it's okay for me to use it. But those are, I don't like calling them like that, but that's what they get at the end. I call them detachment devices, like things
yeah.
that will pat on your baby's back. Like, even if you didn't have hands, you have feet. You can tap your baby's back with your foot, and that will work because they are trying to replace contact. They are telling you that contact um, has to be perceived as lack of progress, as lack of sophistication. And there are a lot of concepts that are, I would say, toxic to our communities. And they were sold the idea that breastfeeding was only for the poor people because formula was better and there was more nurturing for your baby. That babies need to cry it out because then they get used to depending on you. You want independent babies, so you let them cry there. They can figure that out. And those ideas kind of persist in some places in South America. Like, however, they have this barrier of a worldview, or worldview somehow prevents that from happening because I have never met a single mom or a dad that is convinced that letting their baby cry was the best option. Even if they wanted to do it at first, they would be like, okay, let them cry because our pediatrician told us that they need to learn how to get to bed by themselves. But then they start getting anxious and they say, okay, that's it. I'm gonna grab the baby. The baby's gonna come with me. I don't care what my pediatrician or my mom or my aunt says. I'm doing what feels best for me. So we still trust our instincts, and people don't usually give in to social pressure in some contexts.
Yeah, and
It's
it sounds like that really is that again kind of how you were talking about before, that really just trusting instinct and intuition as a parent is prioritized more.
Yeah, it is. It is prioritized more.
Maybe not, maybe that's not even the right way to say it, but it's more like I think in like US culture it's like beaten out of you a little bit. Whereas it sounds like in Peru it's more just something you naturally would just assume that you of course would trust your intuition. Is that
Yeah, there are some things that I learned now on social media. And a lot of friends in the US tell me that they kind of struggle socially when they do things that should be perceived as natural. Like, for example, no one would tell you anything here if you breastfeed, like in your office. That's fine. You can
yeah.
bring your baby can be taken to you to your office. You can breastfeed. There are not even private places to do so. You do it publicly, and no one really cares about that. They might say some comments like making jokes about that, but they don't really mean any harm. So no one would really care if someone is breastfeeding a baby. And if one person does, the other group, the rest of the group will say, "Hey, hold on, the baby needs to breastfeed, so calm
Mhm.
down." So there's someone putting boundaries and setting boundaries like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends in the US have told me that they struggled with those ideas. Like they felt the pressure to, hey, my baby's already 3 months old. She should be socializing with other kids about their age. And I said, give it a thought. Give it a thought because it's a 3 month old we're talking about. And they say, no, but I've been advised that they should socialize with other kids about their age. And they repeat the same tantrum over and over again. And then after 1 year, they said, I don't know how I got to believe that idea. I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I stayed at home with my baby
Oh.
because that was not necessary for me.
Hmm. Rather than maybe sending them to daycare, is that what you were or
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Because that. as I told you before, that daycare concept is not a thing here. It
Mm,
exists, but that's probably the last resource. If you are new in the city, you have no friends, no family, and no neighbor who's willing to,
mm,
well, to look after your baby, you would probably uh, take your baby to a daycare facility. But that's
mm.
very, very usual. Honestly, I've heard of people taking their babies to daycare, but I have never met a person doing so.
Oh wow. So it's very rare. I'm wondering, I know in the US probably part of the reason why so many people have to go it is so normal is because people don't really get much maternity leave after birth. Is there maternity leave in Peru or paternity
There
leave?
is, it's not enough either way, but
Mm,
some people are more understanding of that.
mm,
Like, I have friends who have had their maternity leave and they've been told, you don't need to come to the office, just stay at home.
mm,
You may need to come once a week or maybe twice a week for some hours, but then you do everything at home because
mm,
people are very respectful
yeah.
of maternity. And actually, even if places may have some infrastructural problems sometimes, but you are completely allowed to take your baby, or I mean, your baby is completely allowed to be taken to your office, stay there for some hours. Like it's the top is 2 hours a day, but most most employers would say, okay, it's fine, just stay with your baby. There's a special room for you to breastfeed. Go there, and you can take your baby as many times as you can. Uh, for example, that happened to me when I was a baby. My mom went back to work, and so my grandma used to take me like 3 or 4 times a day during her working schedule. That she worked part-time, I guess, at that time. And yeah, I was able to continue breastfeeding until, well, then my mom quit. She quit, and she went back to my grandparents' house, and they said, "Okay, don't worry, we're going to take care of you and the baby. Don't work, and stay with your baby." So that's usually what happens, huh? Most people would say just, "Okay, I'll quit the job." However, there's a lot of pressure because um, there's this idea that happiness can and success can only be obtained through uh, having a successful job and a successful career. And somehow maternity and paternity are disregarded as not being successful sometimes.
Mm,
So people also struggle with that
mm.
here a lot.
So there are some pressures to kind of stay in the workplace, but at
Yeah,
the same
there
time,
is.
some people would just choose to not continue with work and stay home with the kids. And it sounds like in
Mm.
general there's from the employer to, the grandparents' involvement and just being able to take the baby to work or being more flexible to be able to stay home with the baby if you need. It sounds just there's a awareness that a bit more of awareness of what it takes for a family to be raising a baby and supporting them with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of awareness about that. We are very respectful of babies and moms.
Mm, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
we
And
want to
I
make
can,
things easier for them.
yeah. And I think that I don't know if it is um, your perspective or your cultural perspective or a combination of the two, but I really hear that in what you say about how, the role of dads in supporting moms and then in and how baby wearing can be a part of that. And I think we've had such a great conversation today, and I'm really, really grateful for you sharing with us, your experience as a baby wearing educator and as a dad, and how baby wearing can support families. And also, thank you for just telling us a little bit more about what life is like in Peru when it comes to raising babies. I think it's going to be really interesting, especially for the listeners who maybe do live somewhere like the US or the UK, where it's quite different. I think it's nice to hear, and I think there's a lot that we can learn by sharing these stories. So thank you so much for sharing your
No,
experience with us.
thank you for having me here. That will also help uh, my people in Peru. to have more awareness of uh, how we behave and how we parent in comparison to other cultures. Because sometimes we take some things for granted
Mm,
and we complain a lot.
interesting.
We complain a lot, and I've seen that here. But we're blessed, actually, that we are able to take care of our kids in a community. Even if we say we don't have a community, like my wife and I, it's just the both of us taking care of the baby. My baby doesn't have like a huge amount of people surrounding her, but we do. I have
Hmm.
my whole family, and she's got her whole family taking care of us. And that's how community works. As I said before, not taking care of the baby directly, but taking care of mom and dad.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I'm a postpartum doula, and like that's always my role is to support the mom because I know that if a mom is supported, her baby will thrive.
Uh,
And that's even what research shows us as well. So, um, yes, thank you so much. We're actually going to be
thank
recording.
you.
Actually, I have two more questions for you. Before I ask you the last two questions, to everyone who's listening, we are going to be recording a Q&A episode about how to organize postpartum chores and cleaning for new dads. So stick around for that Q&A episode. The last two questions that I have for you today, Antonia, for this episode, first of all, can you just tell us for all the listeners, where can they find you if they want to learn more about you and maybe book a baby wearing consultation with you?
Sure, you can contact me at Instagram at Wawa Lifter. Wawa is spelled Wawa. Lifter, like weightlifter or power lifter. That's mine. Wawa Lifter.
And everything will
And
be linked in the show notes and the episode description as well.
and if you speak Spanish and are willing to find some low resolution content, you can go to TikTok, which is where I post a lot of things related to traditional baby wearing uh, as well, but mostly in Spanish. So if you are a Spanish speaker or you are proficient in Spanish, you can check my TikTok because there are a lot of videos as well.
Are you the same? Is it Wawa Lifter on TikTok as well?
Oh, yeah, same. It's the same. Wawa Lifter.
Okay, great. Now, the very last question we have for this episode, I like to ask to everyone. Usually, I'm asking if, because usually I have never had a dad on before. So, usually, I'm asking the moms who would come on if they could think back to when they were pregnant with their first baby, what advice they would give to themselves back then. Obviously, you have not been pregnant with your first baby, but when your wife was pregnant with your first baby, what advice would you give to yourself back then? Does this make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, to trust my instincts and don't let noise around me um interfere with what I believe in.
I love
That's
that
the best
advice.
advice I could give people. But that will require for you to be informed and for you
Hmm.
to have read and made your research before and having contacted professionals. That's when your informed decision is heavier than the noise outside. There were many things that I wish we no, I don't wish we had done them differently. But if I had a second baby, there are some things we may definitely do differently. For example, we sleep on the floor. Not on the floor, but we have a
A floor
tatami
bed.
mat for martial arts, and we have futons there. That's how we sleep. Um, but my wife agreed on that many months after the baby was born because I was insistent all pregnancy because she said, "Oh no, I really like my bed. Can we just give it a try first? Let's try the bed, and then uh, if we change our minds, then we can go to the futons." And she, in fact, changed her mind. So speaking for her, she has told me, that's something I would have done differently. I would have done that the first, the very first day, because that's how you can get to sleep by
Yeah.
co-sleeping. Co-sleeping in a safe place, it's the best thing we can do now.
Is co-sleeping in Peru, is it common or is it unco would it be what is more normal?
It's common and very beneficial, but most people are under the impression that we do it because we know it's beneficial. But that's not always true. We do it because of necessity. And I'm glad it has a good outcome. But we do it because we have no space. There's no room for more beds in very small apartments. We are a country where there's a lot of poverty. So if we are all sleeping in the same under the same roof, I mean the same room, there's no way we are going to sleep on separate beds. We need to co-sleep. It's not because people want to, because they believe that's the best for the baby, but because they have no other options.
Okay.
That's why most people co-sleep with
Okay.
their babies.
Thank you for that very last question. All right, we're gonna wrap up this episode now. Um, like I said, if you're listening to this one, you're definitely gonna want to listen to our next one about organizing postpartum chores and cleaning for dads. Thank you so much, Antonio, for recording this episode with you, and I will see you in a sec for the Q&A.
Uh, Thank you.